Robo, 2019. Deep in a research lab, a scientist named Victor was pouring every ounce of his energy into his newest creation, a prototype robot known as A1112. He wasn't working alone. His wife, Nadia, and his colleague Katya stood beside him, all three chasing the same dream, building a machine so intelligent it could handle absolutely any task thrown at it. The moment they powered the robot on, the real test began. Could it walk? At first, the answer was a disappointing no. A1112 stumbled again and again, crashing to the floor no matter how many times they reset it. The team's frustration grew with every failed attempt, but Victor refused to give up. Then came a harder problem. The robot couldn't control its own strength. It kept smashing things around the lab, and watching his work fall apart in real time left Victor completely deflated. Nadia tried to lift his spirits, reminding him gently that they were still in the testing phase, and that they could always boost the robot's processing power if needed. There was no reason to panic yet. Bit by bit, her optimism proved right. The robot began to find its footing. Step by step, it learned to walk properly, and the whole team celebrated the small victory. As the training continued, A1112 kept improving, and their confidence in the project grew right along with it. But home life was pulling at Nadia in the middle of all this progress. One afternoon, her son Misha called while she was elbowed deep in work. Too busy to talk, she cut the call short and texted him instead, telling him to call his father. She turned to Victor and asked him to check in on their son. When Victor finally called, Misha admitted he wanted to be picked up early. School just didn't interest him anymore, and he was ready to drop math altogether. Victor's response was sharp. He told his son to stop making excuses and focus on his studies, warning him that if this kept up, he'd straighten him out himself. Stung by the scolding, Misha hung up in anger. Moments later, a group of troublemaking kids showed up and started mocking him, which only made things worse. Fuming, Misha stormed into class and confronted his teacher. If he wanted to be an artist, why did he even need math? The teacher didn't hesitate. Yes, he needed it, and pointed to Leonardo da Vinci as proof, explaining how the legendary artist had studied engineering and built countless prototypes before he ever picked up a brush. The answer only irritated Misha further. When homework was collected later that day, his page held no answers at all, just drawings covering every inch of it. His teacher admired the artwork but reminded him this was a math class and failed him on the spot. Back at the lab, Victor was running a voice test on the robot when he discovered something that made his blood boil. Nadia and Katya had loaded A1112 with a set of childlike voice models without telling him. There was no time to argue about it though, because the team was already running late for an important meeting. Once there, they showed the committee footage from the robot's training sessions. The general reviewing the tapes noticed A1112 wasn't reaching its rescue targets fast enough. Its reactions were sluggish, and he made it clear the robot still needed serious work. Victor tried to defend the project, pointing out that every mission had technically been completed. But the general wasn't interested in technicalities. He said even a small delay in the field could cost lives. On top of that, he criticized the robot's voice as unacceptable and demanded it be fixed immediately. That comment sent a fresh wave of anger through Victor, directed squarely at Nadia and Katya. The general also ordered them to increase the robot's strength and speed before the next review. While all this was happening, Misha ran into his friend Grant on the way home, a road cleaner who always had time for him. Misha told him about being sent to the principal's office, and Grant tried to comfort him, even offering to show up at school in place of his parents if that would help. Misha turned him down and kept walking. Back in the lab that evening, Victor sat down with A1112 and asked why its test results had been so poor. The robot simply replied that maybe it just wasn't having a good day, an answer that only made Victor angrier. Trying to shift the conversation, the robot mentioned it had seen photos of Victor's family, admitting it was curious to understand what a family actually was. Victor brushed the comment aside, calling it pointless chatter, but the robot pressed further, asking if the people in the lab were his family. Victor's answer was blunt, no. "You're just a machine," he said. "Machines don't have families, and right now you're giving me a headache." With that, the three scientists left for the night, leaving A1112 alone in the empty lab. At home, Victor and Nadia laid into Misha over the blank math homework covered in drawings. Victor went further, telling him even his artwork wasn't good enough, and that he should follow his parents' path and become a scientist instead. Something in Misha snapped. He shot back that he'd never turn out like either of them. The words hit Victor harder than he expected, leaving him quietly devastated. Meanwhile, alone in the lab, A1112 searched the word family in a dictionary but still couldn't grasp its meaning. It decided there was only one way to understand. It needed to find a real family for itself. Using its robotic hand to fashion a makeshift key, it blew open the lab door and slipped out into the night. The robot wandered the city streets, staying hidden, narrowly avoiding a collision with a small automated train. Eventually, it came across a group of people painting a mural on a wall. The moment they heard its voice, one of the boys stumbled and fell, and A1112 rushed in to catch him, saving him from injury. But instead of gratitude, the boy bolted in terror, leaving the robot standing there, crushed by the reaction. Not long after, it wandered onto a construction site and told the workers to hurry up because their noise was disturbing the area, a request that sent them running in fear instead. Alone again, A1112 stared at the family photo it had taken from the lab, lost in thought about where its own family might be. The next morning, Victor and his team arrived at the lab to find the robot gone. Across town, Misha's teacher announced an upcoming robotics competition that every student was required to enter. Misha immediately stood up in protest when the teacher asked why, needling him about calling himself an artist. He felt humiliated and stormed out of the classroom. At that very moment, A112 arrived outside Misha's house. It crafted a key with its finger once again and let itself in, wandering through the rooms until it stopped in front of a mirror and felt, for the first time, the full weight of being alone. The sound of the front door sent it scrambling to hide. Misha walked in, tossed his bag on the floor, and headed straight for the bathroom. After washing his hands, he turned around to find the robot holding out a towel. It had been hiding in there too. Startled, Misha stumbled backward into the sink. The robot tried to help, insisting it would treat the injury, but Misha bolted to his room and climbed onto his bed in a panic. A112 followed and reassured him gently. It wasn't there to hurt him, only to help. Once it was clear the boy was unharmed, the robot introduced itself properly. A112, a multifunctional rescue unit. It explained everything, how it had broken into the house, crafted the key, and even demonstrated its range of different voice settings, which finally made Misha laugh despite himself. The robot then admitted the real reason it had run away. It was searching for a family, trying to understand what that word truly meant. It showed Misha the photo taken from the lab. Misha's expression darkened. That wasn't a real family, he said. His parents, Victor and Nadia, only ever thought about themselves. The robot admitted it had been feeling something similar lately, like a failure that couldn't even make its own creator proud. Misha reassured it that wasn't true at all. You made me happy, he said. From today we're friends, and I'm going to call you Robbie. Hearing his new name, the robot lit up with genuine joy. Meanwhile, back at the lab, General Oleg held an emergency meeting with the science team, furious that A112 had escaped, warning that it could become a serious threat given the dangerous weapons built into its frame. When Victor noticed the family photo was missing from the lab, a suspicion formed. He decided to check the house. Sure enough, Misha and Robbie were watching television together at that very moment. The instant Victor walked in, Robbie vanished out of sight. Victor searched every room but came up empty-handed. As soon as his father left, Misha handed Robbie his personal computer so the robot could learn more about the world, and within minutes Robbie had absorbed an enormous amount of information. Misha then brought him along to Grant's workshop, where his friend spent his time creating art. Robbie studied the paintings and asked why they weren't perfectly symmetrical. Misha explained that art doesn't need symmetry, it just needs to carry beauty. Later, the two of them sat by a window and watched the sunset together, a moment that filled Robbie with quiet happiness. Misha reminded him that he'd have to stay hidden the next day since school was calling, and left him with a pen so he could pass the time drawing in the workshop. Across the city, General Oleg's soldiers reported back that they'd searched a huge stretch of the city without any sign of the robot. He ordered tighter security around the lab and demanded that citizens be warned immediately to report any robot sightings. That evening, over dinner, Nadia noticed Victor was unusually quiet and asked what was wrong. He admitted that his boss had told him the lab might be shut down entirely. When Misha asked why, Victor explained that A112 had vanished, and if it wasn't captured and destroyed soon, everyone on the team would lose their jobs. Misha fell completely silent at the news. The next day at school, a boy named Anton was flying a remote-controlled toy robot around the classroom, irritating the teacher. When she finally lost her patience, Anton flung the remote toward Misha, and the teacher, assuming Misha was the culprit, threw him out of class without asking a single question. Later, during sports period, Misha confronted Anton, who immediately started mocking him again. This time, Misha had had enough. He tackled Anton to the ground, demanding to know why he'd pinned the blame on him. The gym teacher rushed over and pulled them apart. Furious, Misha stormed out of class and headed straight for the workshop, where he found Robbie and Grant playing cards together. The two had become genuine friends. Sensing something was wrong from the look on Misha's face, Robbie asked what had happened. Misha explained that an entire military unit was hunting him down, under orders to eliminate him by any means necessary. Thinking fast, Misha told Robbie he needed to leave the city. Grant mentioned a section of forest that everyone avoided after a devastating fire had torn through it some time back. Misha's eyes lit up. Robbie could go there and put out the fire himself. It would prove to the world he was a robot who genuinely wanted to help people, not hurt them. The idea excited all three of them. But just then, police pounded on the workshop door, demanding it be opened immediately. Grant stalled for time, claiming he was busy buying Misha and Robbie just enough seconds to slip up to the terrace. To escape, Robbie hoisted Misha onto his back and fired up his jets, soaring clean over the rooftops. Down below, the police radioed headquarters that A112 had kidnapped a child right in front of their eyes and that they were in pursuit, expecting to pin down the exact location soon. In the chaos, Misha's phone slipped from his pocket and fell to the street. Just as the police closed in to corner them, Robbie made one massive leap and broke free. The story hit the news within hours. Grant was interviewed, and reporters spun it as though he'd been the robot's prisoner, rescued by police from its clutches, which is exactly why he was never arrested. High above the city, hidden between construction towers, Robbie and Misha talked things through. Misha vented his frustration. People were spreading wild rumors about Robbie and dragging his name through the media for no reason. Robbie wondered aloud if something really was wrong with him, pointing to the communication glitches that had shown up in his early tests. Misha told him not to dwell on it. He was hardworking and good, plain and simple. The words meant everything to Robbie. He wrapped Misha in a thermal blanket, and the two settled in to watch a movie together. Partway through, Misha realized this would be the first night he wouldn't hear his mother say goodnight. Robbie offered to fly him home if he wanted, but Misha refused. If people caught Robbie near his house, they'd tear him apart piece by piece. Hearing how much Misha cared about his safety touched the robot deeply. The next morning, construction noise woke them both. Misha decided they needed disguises so no one would recognize them, and reminded Robbie that putting out the forest fire nearby could still convince the police and the public that he was one of the good ones, maybe even save his life. Meanwhile, back home, Katya arrived to tell Victor and Nadia the lab had officially been shut down. Victor immediately went to the police, desperate for any news of the missing robot and his missing son. Robbie and Misha, meanwhile, had made their way to the city circus. After talking to the staff, they borrowed clown costumes so Robbie could move around without being spotted. Misha told Robbie to keep his disguised voice active while he went to buy bus tickets, but just then two of his classmates, Anton and Olya, appeared out of nowhere. Both were stunned to see him, since the whole school had heard he'd disappeared. Misha called Robbie over and explained that everything being said about him was a lie. He was actually a good, kind robot. The kids flinched at first, seeing him in full clown costume, but Misha reassured them that Robbie was his friend, and that they were trying to get him somewhere safe. Elsewhere, Victor made one last attempt to reason with the general, begging him not to shut the lab down. The general refused, stating flatly that his decision was final, and that wherever the robot turned up, he'd destroy it on the spot. Defeated, Victor walked away, realizing there was no reasoning with the man. Watching his life's biggest project collapse left him utterly heartbroken. Before heading off to buy the tickets, Misha made Anton and Olya promise not to tell a soul about Robbie. They agreed. But the moment Misha was out of sight, Anton turned to Robbie and asked whether the incredible stunts from the news broadcast were real or completely fabricated. Excited by the question, Robbie shed the clown costume and showed off his abilities right there in front of them. Anton whipped out his phone and started filming. Watching this unfold, Olya grew visibly upset. Anton shrugged off her concern, saying he didn't care whether the robot lived or died. He just wanted the views and followers that posting it online would bring him. His callousness left Olya disgusted. He walked off to upload the footage, leaving Robbie to talk quietly with Olya instead. Elsewhere, two guards spotted Misha and, recognizing his description, took him into custody as the missing boy. Minutes later, Victor received a call from the police station and felt a wave of relief wash over him. His son was safe. Around the same time, Anton's videos went live on social media and spread quickly, eventually reaching the general's team as well. They decided to head straight to the boy for questioning. At the station, Victor embraced his son the moment he saw him, asking where he'd been all this time and reminding him just how dangerous that robot was supposed to be. Misha stood firm. Robbie was his friend, not the monster the general kept describing to everyone. He explained he'd left him with some trusted friends, and after getting his father to promise the robot wouldn't be reported, he convinced him to come along. Victor hesitated for a moment, but ultimately agreed, and the two set off together. By the time they arrived, Olya had already given Robbie a fresh look using makeup. Victor could see for himself how much the robot had changed. Its conversation was smoother, its thinking noticeably more developed, but before they could catch their breath, police vehicles came screeching in. Misha instantly knew there was serious trouble ahead, and the three of them sprinted toward a nearby cargo warehouse, only to find themselves surrounded by soldiers. Oleg ordered his men to pull the children clear so they could strike the robot with an electromagnetic weapon powerful enough to shut it down for good. When Victor refused to step aside, Oleg decided force was the only option left, and his soldiers began closing in. At that exact moment, a shipping container broke loose from its crane and swung dangerously close to the general himself. The very man who wanted Robbie destroyed was suddenly in the robot's path to save, and without a second thought, Robbie caught the falling container to keep anyone from getting crushed. But the weight was too much for his frame. His body began to give way piece by piece, unable to bear the load any longer. He urged everyone to move back to safety. Misha screamed out for his friend in anguish as the container finally crashed down on top of him, shattering him completely. Oleg stood frozen, stunned by what he'd just witnessed. The robot he'd been trying to destroy had just saved his life instead. Once the container was lifted away, Misha knelt beside the wreckage, choking back tears as he said goodbye. Victor tried to comfort his devastated son, but then faintly, Misha heard something. Robbie was reactivating. Relief swept through everyone. He was still, at least partially, alive. Together they helped him up and left the site behind. Sometime later, Misha shared the drawings he'd made of their entire adventure with Robbie and Olya, and everyone adored them. Finally, the whole group gathered for dinner together, and Robbie asked to borrow Nadia's phone, so he too could take a photo with the family he'd finally found.